New season stream free on SBS On Demand.
The UN votes to expand Palestinian rights in the General Assembly, why Australia voted yes despite an angry response from Israel. Also tonight, the US announces more aid for Ukraine as Kharkiv comes under near-daily attack. Controversy at Eurovision, the mysterious disappearance of the contestant from the Netherlands. And the powerful solar storm creating dazzling skies around the world. Will it trigger power and communications blackouts? I'm Anton Enus. This is SBS World News. Good evening. Australia has joined the international community, which last night overwhelmingly voted in favour of a Palestinian bid for full membership at the United Nations. The UN General Assembly voted in favour of granting Palestinians more rights as an observer state and recommended the Security Council favourably consider approving full membership. In other developments, Israel's UN ambassador condemned the vote, shredding a copy of the UN Charter in protest. The US says Israel may have breached international law in its use of American-supplied weapons in Gaza. And the UN says 110,000 people have left the city of Rafah, but more than 1 million remain. But first, the UN vote and why Australia voted in support.
A historic vote during the 10th emergency special session of the government. Also maintaining the motion was a clear rejection of Hamas. Taisok Husey, SBS World News.
And in the last few hours, Israel has expanded evacuation orders in Rafah. It's a clear sign the ground offensive there is set to expand, despite repeated warnings from the US against an invasion of the city. That after a report to Congress found Israel may have breached international humanitarian law with American weapons.
Israel's forces today in action in central Gaza.
From the One SBS World News.
Police in Peru have arrested the president's brother and lawyer during an ongoing investigation into influence peddling. President Dina Boluarte is being investigated after she was spotted wearing a number of different expensive watches and jewelry. Her brother, Nicanor, is accused of leading a criminal organization which influences the appointments of people in positions of power. He denies the claim. More than 800 protesters have clashed with police in Germany over the expansion of a Tesla car factory outside the capital, Berlin. Protesters raised concerns about destruction to the local environment, as well as Tesla's lithium mining practices in countries like Argentina and Bolivia. Clashes broke out when a number of activists tried to storm the site, escaping the heavy police presence through the forest. The federal government will pour an additional $1 billion into crisis accommodation for survivors of domestic violence. Much of the housing sector has welcomed a new funding deal with the states and territories to boost social housing supply and combat homelessness. But the Prime Minister was today fending off questions as to how much of the money pledged in the upcoming budget is actually new.
With limited front-page real estate ahead of Budget Day, the Prime Minister
they have taken money, the same amount of money that the coalition spent over the last 5 years, and have said over the next 5 years they're going to do the same and pretend like it's something new.
Which is just business as usual. It's an agreement that's been in place now for nearly 15 years.
No, it's not right. There was no agreement. The funding ran out on July 1. This is a new agreement going forward.
The government will also require universities to build more student accommodation to free up rentals. This week, as part of its tertiary education overhaul, it introduces new legislation to allow the Education Minister to cap future international student arrivals, a decision taken in part because of those housing pressures. Naveen Razik, SBS World News.
Coming up, Brazil's flood crisis. No end in sight to the emergency impacting millions of people. We take a closer look at the government's Future Made in Australia plan. How will it drive investment in green industries? And the great Kiwi migration. Why tens of thousands of New Zealanders are moving to Australia. Historic flooding in Brazil is continuing to wreak havoc, with 126 people dead and hundreds of thousands displaced. Some parts of the state of Rio Grande do Sul have received almost half their annual predicted rainfall totals, as many local waterways top record levels. The torrential downpour has also impacted neighbouring Uruguay, where thousands of people have been forced from their homes.
These men are used to being on the water, but it's usually in pursuit of world news.
Now to Eurovision, and we'll start with a courtesy warning. We'll be talking about who's in and who's out as we head towards the grand final. So if you're waiting for all to be revealed and the coverage following tonight's news, now's the time to look away. Well, there's been more controversy at the contest, with the Netherlands banned from rehearsals after a backstage incident. Let's join our chief international correspondent, Ben Lewis, who's in Malmö tonight. Ben, good evening to you. What's going on there? Do we know if the Dutch contestant will be allowed to compete in the grand final tonight, Swedish time?
Well, Anton, good evening. It's pretty remarkable, but no, we don't know if he will be allowed to compete. We understand that the Dutch contestant, Joost Klein, was involved in some sort of an incident backstage involving a member of the production team. Malmö police say they are investigating, and they are talking about threats that were allegedly made. At this stage, no one has been arrested, and Eurovision producers are currently locked in talks with the Dutch national broadcaster about what is going to happen. It's just more controversy at what has been an already very controversial song contest, much of it, of course, focused around the participation of Israel during the ongoing war in Gaza. Last night, Israel's singer Eden Golan was booed when she was performing at the jury show, and that happened at some of the rehearsals as well. She will be taking the stage tonight and is now one of the favourites to win the competition. Many here in Malmö are not happy about Israel's participation, though, and another large-scale pro-Palestinian rally is going to be held in the city with around 10,000 people expected.
And Ben, the other thing we know, of course, sadly, Australia failed to qualify for the grand final for just the second time. But there is someone for Aussie fans to cheer for.
Yeah, that's right. Australian Eurovision fans are particularly lucky this year. Electric Fields didn't make it, but the Cypriot entrant, 17-year-old Celia Kapsis, is born and raised in proud Cypriot Australian. She is going to be taking the stage in the final, and she has called for all Australian Eurovision fans to vote for her. Of course, a very rare opportunity for Australians to vote for an Australian in the Eurovision Song Contest. Anton, one other thing to look out for in the grand final: 50 years since ABBA performed Waterloo at Eurovision. There is going to be a special tribute to ABBA. Normally we get to see what is in the show at the various dress rehearsals. We haven't had any previews at all, so ABBA fans will want to be tuning in.
And that's all of us, of course. Thanks, Ben, updating us live from Malmö. Well, you can catch up on all the action with our Access All Areas prime time broadcast tonight at 7:30 with hosts Miff Warhurst and Joel Creasy. And the grand final will be live and exclusive from 5 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow on SBS and SBS On Demand. Hundreds of mothers have marched through the streets of Mexico City calling for justice for their missing children and help from authorities to find them. More than 100,000 people have disappeared in Mexico. For their families, Mother's Day is a painful reminder.
Through the streets of Mexico City, a now familiar chant, never tiring in their fight for justice. Edwina Guinan, SBS World News.
Dozens of homes have been damaged in Western Australia after a tornado lashed the city of Bunbury in the state's southwest. Emergency services received more than 100 calls for help as the sudden and severe storm hit the area. 2 people were taken to hospital with injuries, and thousands of properties were left without power.
What we saw yesterday was an incredibly confronting and in many ways traumatic incident. There has been some extensive damage done.
A major cleanup is underway and a hazardous materials warning has been issued due to the potential presence of asbestos in the impacted area. The West Australian and federal governments are at loggerheads over the planned phasing out of live sheep exports by 2028, with Premier Roger Cook branding the move not good enough and demanding more support. Federal Labor has promised a 5-year, $107 million support package for the industry to transition, with legislation for the phase-out to be enacted in this term of Parliament.
We think that this is a fair and reasonable package of taxpayers' funding going towards an industry that is already in long-term decline. As I say, the amount of money that we're putting on the table is nearly 5 times what the Western Australian government estimated would be the economic impact of this decision if it transitioned in the way that we're talking about.
The leader of the Nationals, David Littleproud, has also hit out at the move, vowing to maintain the live sheep trade if the coalition wins the next federal election. One of the main features of next week's federal budget will be the government's Future Made in Australia plan. It's akin to the US Inflation Reduction Act, aimed at driving investment in green industries and safeguarding global supply chains. Spending to make solar panels, batteries, green hydrogen and grow critical minerals has already been announced, with more to come in the budget. Political correspondent Sarah Temefska travelled to Queensland at the front line of the energy transition.
Welcome to Coal Country, the engine room of
can be appropriately prepared.
In a statement, the Department of Agriculture told SBS it's closely monitoring the outbreak overseas, and Australia has nationally agreed response and cost-sharing arrangements in place to respond to animal disease incidents and outbreaks, including for avian influenza. Some experts say the global community must rethink how it produces food.
These intensive animal systems with high density of animals that are very genetically similar do facilitate the spread of virus. And if it's not avian influenza, it's going to be another virus.
Warning the risk of disease jumping from animals to humans isn't going away. Abby O'Brien, SBS World News.
Coming up, the plight of African penguins, why it's feared they could become extinct. And a bizarre accident brings Novak Djokovic to his knees in Rome. Tourists travel from all over the world to see them, but African penguins native to the west coast of South Africa are in danger of extinction. Conservationists are worried that overfishing and destruction of habitat could wipe out the population in the next decade. They're taking legal action against the South African government over what they say is a failure to protect the endangered species.
Theirs is a story of survival. But every year, there are fewer African penguins. Soon, there may be none at all. Life on Africa's southern tip is precarious. There are predators, seals and gulls. But the real enemy is human, wrecking their habitat and taking their food. Now, conservationists are taking the South African government to court.
If the current rates of decline persist into the near future, we could see the extinction of the species within our lifetime by 2035.
So it happens when they
The birds need sardines and anchovies, but the fishing industry wants them too. South Africa's entering untested legal waters. Fishermen are already banned from some areas. Conservationists want the courts to close off more. In the harbours here, fury. It'll cost, workers warn, money and jobs, and it won't help the penguins.
We're a fraction of the problem. Well, there's predation, seals, sharks. We've got oil and gas exploration, noise pollution.
It's going to be a little bit bumpy, but...
Watching the case, a man who's spent decades monitoring the wildlife here.
If government, fisheries, and all the NGOs play their part, I think they've got a good future. We can overcome what's happening at the moment.
You really get a sense of their vulnerability. Many of the penguins in this colony are protecting eggs. They're waiting to raise their young, and yet ultimately their fate lies in human hands. The South African government won't yet comment on the case. and legal action can take a long time. Already too late, some fear, for Africa's dying breed.
Jenny Hill with that report from South Africa. Well, Saturday sport now with Breanna Holden, and Bree, a big day for our Olympic athletes in Doha.
Yeah, Anton, our Paris-bound Aussies turned it up in the Diamond League with reigning world pole vault champion Nina Kennedy leading the way. The 27-year-old is widely considered our best hope for athletics gold at this year's Olympics, and her second-placed finish at the opening Diamond League pole vault event clearly marked her intent for the Paris Games.
Still a Nina Kennedy.
All eyes on Nina Kennedy as the world champion jumped into her first competition of 2024.
But now it's a little better, and that is better from Kennedy as well. Excellent, and a fist bump from her.
An impressive 4.73 metres, even if Kennedy was shaking off the cobwebs of the off-season.
This is my first competition back with, the best girls in the world. I'm a little bit rusty.
Rusty or not, she matched the height of eventual winner Molly Cowdery, the Brit taking gold thanks to a higher clearance accuracy.
Molly is an amazing jumper, so, we both cleared 73 on our first attempt, so that fills me with confidence.
Kennedy not the only Aussie to charge onto the podium in Doha. Runner Jessica Hull also pulling off a classy silver in the women's 1500 metres.
Oh, battling away for second place. I think she's going to get second too, but the finish line is going to come in time for the lead.
As did Matthew Denny in the men's discus, while 2022 high jump world champ Eleanor Patterson ensured her rivals were kept on their toes with a jump of 1.91 metres to finish third.
Third attempt, 191. Cometh the hour and all that.
But the performance of the night went to American Kenneth Bednarek, who ran a world-leading time in the men's 200-metre sprint.
And Bednarek shows that he loves it here in Doha. He's going to win this one fairly comfortably, plus 1.7. That is an incredible run.
I came out here wanting the world lead, wanted to have fun because we got 3 of my teammates in the same race, so it's all fun and games. It's just executing the race.
Novak Djokovic has confirmed he's okay after being struck by a metal bottle following his match against Corentin Moutet at the Italian Open. The world's top-ranked male tennis player won comfortably in straight sets, with the incident taking place a few minutes later as Djokovic stopped to sign autographs as he left the court. A metal water bottle slipped out of a backpack by a fan by accident and hit the Serbian star on the head, causing minor bleeding. Thankfully, he didn't need stitches. It was a dramatic end to Sydney FC's semi-final first leg loss to defending A-League champions the Central Coast last night, with 2 Sky Blues sent off. Joel King put Sydney into the lead after 25 minutes, but the Mariners fought back, with Josh Nisbet scoring the equaliser on the stroke of half-time. Mikhail Docker's spot kick put the visitors ahead. The night then descending into chaos for the Sky Blues, who first lost Jack Rodwell to a straight red card before Corey Holman was also sent packing for a second yellow card inside the final 10 minutes. Today, Pogacar has extended his lead at the Giro d'Italia thanks to a dominant time trial display on stage 7. It was the first individual test of speed at this year's Giro, and the 2-time Tour de France winner passed with flying colours. So impressive, in fact, he finished a full 2 minutes ahead of his nearest rivals on the standings. Australia's Luke Plapp finished in 7th spot, enough to lift the 27-year-old to the top of the young riders classification. Pogacar heads into tonight's 8th stage, holding a 2-minute 26-second advantage over Daniel Martinez of Colombia. In the AFL this afternoon, Hawthorn defeated a struggling St Kilda to secure a 3rd win from its last 4 matches. The Hawks led from start to finish, with Nick Watson scoring a pair of goals. Max King's 2 goals for the Saints kept things tight, but Hawthorn held on to record a 5-point win, with Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, soaking up the atmosphere, taking part in post-match celebrations. Newcastle Knights centre Bradman Best has firmly put his hand up for Origin selection. Adam O'Brien's men made it 3 straight wins in the NRL with a 6-point victory against West's Tigers. Best made several big plays in the match, including a superb run to set up David Armstrong for a try just after half-time. He then added a try of his own to seal the win. In Super Netball, the Adelaide Thunderbirds sit third after defeating the Mavericks. Jamaican star Romelda Aiken-George firing Adelaide to a 22-point victory. The Mavericks have struggled early in their debut season with just 1 win from 5 games. And big-time boxing is on the agenda in Perth tomorrow with a must-win battle. Ukrainian boxing legend Vasily Lomachenko is fighting Australia's George Kambosos for the vacant IBF lightweight world title. And the 2-time Olympic gold medalist Lomachenko is receiving plenty of support.
There's only one name on the minds of these Ukrainians.
Vasily Lomachenko, the best of the best.
Dave travelled all the way from his hometown in Ukraine to be in Australia.
Please face each other, boys.
And witness one of the biggest fights of his career. While those who forged a better life in Perth say Lomachenko is a national symbol of hope.
Кожен раз, коли він виходить на ринки і вдягає український прапор, це свідчить про те, що він теж інформує світ про те, що коїться в Україні на зараз.
The fight between Vasily Lomachenko and George Kambosos Jr. has been 2 years in the making after Lomachenko enlisted in a different kind of fight, joining the Ukrainian army to defend his homeland against the Russian invasion.
I think that he likes a national hero of our country. Так, в мене багато друзів, які зараз на лінії фронту, і вони захищають Україну на даний момент. Я дуже вдячна всім, хто підтримує Україну і на лінії фронту, і тут.
It's the first time Lomachenko visited Australia, taking time out to visit Perth's Ukrainian boxing community and playing tourists.
We saw you holding the koala. He was nice.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it looks like a cat with a dog.
After a legendary amateur career, Vasily Lomachenko has already cemented his status in boxing, while Aussie Greek George Kambosos Jr. is looking to restore his reputation as a world beater.
When I beat Lomachenko, there will be no more road for him to go. So, look, this is retirement for him.
I heard this not first time, but, for me it's not a surprise. And see what happened.
On Sunday, Kambosos Jr. will have the home of. He has an entire community cheering him on. Christopher Tan, SBS World News.
And that's the day in sport. And Anton, just a reminder, the Giro d'Italia is, of course, on Viceland later this evening.
Something to look forward to. Thanks, Bree. Coming up, the weather and dazzling drones, a spectacular light show in South Korea. Earth is experiencing its first extreme geomagnetic storm in more than 2 decades as the sun approaches the peak of an 11-year cycle. The rare solar event has triggered spectacular auroras in skies across Europe and North America. Similar sightings of the aurora australis were reported in Australia and New Zealand, and more are predicted to be visible from Sydney, Perth and parts of Queensland. The geomagnetic storm is rated G5, that's the highest on the scale.
This is sort of a huge explosion that can be associated with the flare, but basically what happens is part of the sun actually lifts off the surface, right? So this plasma, the charged particles, the magnetic field that makes up the sun, part of it actually lifts off the sun and streams away into space.
The flares are powerful enough to disrupt satellite and communication systems, the power grid and even radio signals. Let's go to the forecast now. Humid and unstable winds will maintain wet conditions across eastern parts of New South Wales. More showers expected along Queensland's coast and the Northern Territory's far northeast. Easterly winds will clear clouds over southwest WA. In the major centres, showers in Sydney, rain easing in Canberra, cloud clearing over Melbourne, partly cloudy in Hobart and Adelaide, partly cloudy also for Perth and Darwin, more showers ahead in Brisbane. Looking further afield, partly cloudy in Port Vila, clear in Nandi and Noumea, a few showers in Wellington, clear also for Christchurch. In Southeast Asia, thunder in Bangkok, cloudy in Phnom Penh, thunder also for Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, rain in Port Moresby. Further north, fine in Beijing and Seoul, clouds over Shanghai, rain in Taipei, a few showers in Hong Kong. Heading west, partly cloudy in Tehran and Jerusalem, rain in Islamabad, thunder in New Delhi and Mumbai. As we go to Europe now, showers in Dublin, clear in Warsaw, partly cloudy in Kiev, fog in Paris, partly cloudy also in Istanbul. In Africa, clouds over Algiers, fine in Cairo, cloudy in Lagos, showers in Nairobi, fine conditions in Johannesburg. In South America, thunder in Panama City, rain in Bogota, clear in La Paz, partly cloudy in Rio and some drizzle about in Buenos Aires. And for North America, clear skies in Vancouver and San Francisco, showers in New York, partly cloudy in Los Angeles, clear in Miami and cloudy over Mexico City. A display of flying drones has dazzled spectators at this year's Korea Drone Expo. The performance took place in Incheon, a port city that borders the capital Seoul. UVFi, which specializes in light shows, used more than 5,000 drones to animate the sky.
A synchronized show comprising 5,293 points of light, each a single drone. Just a few years ago, drone shows like these were measured in the hundreds. Increasing in scale and sophistication, they represent the cumulative efforts of a small army of technicians.
It's like art. There's always a sense of passion, excitement when you see something, when you see that what people can do with technology.
That technology now allows for drones being moved in swarms with an accuracy of less than 1 centimeter. It's a stunning demonstration of drone power that's on show at the nearby exhibition centre, showing off the rapid integration of drones into virtually every aspect of our lives. The business of commercial drones is forecast to see double-digit growth in the coming years, enabled by rapidly developing technologies, from the artificial intelligence that controls them to the batteries that power them. A whole industry that until relatively recently didn't even exist.
There's going to be more and more new industries evolving. We kind of, just barely looking over the horizon, getting a sense of.
But horizons, it seems, that will increasingly be filled with drones.
Rob McBride reporting there. And that's the world this Saturday. If you've missed some of tonight's bulletin, you can catch up at SBS On Demand. And for the top stories, head to the SBS News website. I'll be back with news updates for you throughout the evening. But now don't forget, up next is Eurovision Semi-Final 2. Good night.